I thought, well, what can we do? And Amy offered that we could do more of the Gospel of John. She'll do that, in fact, after Easter. Like two people commented to me today, didn't we read the whole Gospel this morning already? Well, we didn't, in fact. So I thought any preparation is give you a sense of what it's like to go to Gustavus Adolphus College with our 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and now 9th and 10th graders. The 9th and 10th graders that go have already been through all our 4 different series at least once, and they enjoy it so much at the college that they have gone back for now a second, and some of them a third time. So when we started going to Gustavus, because it was clear to me when I start with a new confirmation class on a Wednesday night each year that some kids have been in Sunday school and some kids have not. And I can tell. Anybody could tell. And so we decided that we would try this series of retreats at Gustavus to try and help those who have not been in Sunday school get up to speed more before confirmation. And then, and it's a good review and learning experience for the kids that have been in Sunday school all their lives. And we went to Gustavus because they really get it as a college. I'm not a Gustavus grad, but Gustavus has built in the basement of one of their dormitories a hostel for church youth groups. And they have 4 rooms that are, they're not very big. The living room is maybe as long as 2 tables together, so 16 feet, and it's maybe 12 feet wide. And there's some pretty cheap but cushy furniture in there. And then there are 3 sleeping rooms with bunk beds in that will sleep 8 people each. Bathroom, showers down the hall. And we can go there for $50, not per student, not per night. We can go there for $50.
Oh my goodness.
And the only real expense, and we get 35 of that back if we don't back out. And the only real expense is to eat in the college cafeteria. And now when I was in college, between 1971 and 1975, I worked in the cafeteria. And you walked past the steam table, and you got a choice of 2 mystery meats, and either some rice or potatoes. I mean, not the same night. I mean, there was either rice one night or potatoes that night, and some kind of green beans or peas or something like that. And then there was a salad bar outside that you could have as much salad as you wanted and as much of a sheet cake as you wanted. When you go to Gustavus now, right inside the door on the left is the rotisserie chicken and gyro station.
Oh my.
In this corner is the pasta and pizza. Over here in the back is the Oriental walk kind of stuff. There's a sandwich bar and a hamburger bar and a salad bar with 2 different kinds of soup. And I gotta say, I think I would get tired of eating that food every day for a semester, but for a weekend, really can't beat it, So I know that the main attraction is not what we're gonna do today, so you won't get a real taste of Gustavus, but the kids do love to go. And I'm pleased that I think one reason why Jenna Stepnick is there now is because we've been going as a congregation.
Yes, does that.
Which is why the college gets it. If we can just get kids on the campus. The first time we went, Leah and I took 6 kids and we had to duct tape 3 kids to get them into the cars, you know, because they were not going. They were not. No, they were not gonna. They were not gonna have a good time. They wanted. We want to go home. Blah blah blah. And by lunchtime, we go Thursday night. We leave here at 6. Down there by 8. By lunchtime on Friday, so that's having had 2 Bible studies and 2 meals. All of them want to go to college there, and why can't we stay until Sunday? Why do we have to go back Saturday? And they'll give us free tickets to, we usually go when there's a hockey game in the wintertime, or a basketball game, or we haven't seen basketball, but a football game in the fall, just to get a taste of campus life. And it's really a great experience. So, let's take a look at this, and I thought I was going to start with Jesus' birth. We teach Old Testament, New Testament, 10 Commandments. If you memorize all 10 Commandments, you get a free t-shirt from the college. And then we have Martin Luther and the Small Catechism. So those are the 4 units that do 5 studies in each retreat. So we work some when we're there. Anyway, I thought, well, we'll do New Testament today because we're gonna do 10 Commandments in the fall. Not necessarily this format, but we would be doing the 10 Commandments. So I thought, well, we're in the midst of Lent. We'll look at the Passion, the death of Jesus. So, Jesus made enemies among some very important or powerful people because they thought he was too kind and gracious to Gentiles. What else? Sinners. Outcasts. He made clear that in the kingdom, I do spell things out when we're there. I suppose I could do that this morning, but when you turn these in, you won't be graded on spelling. Be sure and put your name at the top, because I want to see who knows what. He made it clear that in the kingdom of God there was room for insiders and outsiders. Remember, this is for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Jesus proved God loves everyone, and not just some of the people, or a few of the people. His enemies decided that one way, in fact, the only way to stop him was to kill him or crucify. Okay. They arranged to pay one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot. So sometimes, as Amy knows, we end up playing hangman. Okay, and I was thinking that the kids were getting tired of that, but then after I always ask at the end of the 5th session, how would you score this on a scale of 1 to 10? And some of the kids were given 6s and 7s because we haven't played it more than once. So, I mean, you just can't figure sometimes, right? Paid one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, to betray Jesus. For his betrayal, or you could say treason, right? Or treason, they paid him 30 pieces of silver. Even though he knew he was going to die, Jesus rode into Jerusalem. Do you need Mama?
I need a pencil, I guess. Here, no. Okay, here you go.
Where are we? Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, after a crowd
Hailed him?
Hailed him, cheered him, okay? He went to the temple. In the temple, he attacked those who sold animals for sacrifice, and those who believed that the temple and God were only for Jewish, good, righteous, godly, okay? That was the final straw for his
Enemies.
His what?
Enemies.
Yep, or opponents. I have wondered a bit, I mean, I don't wonder a lot or often, but I have wondered if it makes sense to speak about Jesus having enemies. And one reason is because of what I tried to say in last Wednesday night's Lent sermon, because it's my impression that Jesus did not hate. So while he might recognize people as his opponents, I don't know that he would call them his enemies. Do you know what I mean? That he would see them differently. I mean, I have enemies. Okay? But I don't know about him. On which night of that same week? Thursday night of that same week. I gotta say, this is one difference between, I think, when I was in Sunday school and a lot of our kids today. I knew what Maundy, Thursday was. I think there are a lot of kids that don't. On Thursday night of that same week, Jesus, and my mother was a Lutheran her whole life, but there were two nights we never ate meat. Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. There was always canned salmon. Why? Because we don't eat meat. Well, why not? Well, because it's Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. You know, anybody else have that experience? That's your house? You were Catholic.
I was Lutheran. My parents were Lutheran their whole life. I said, Mom, why do you do this? This is what Catholics do for Good Friday. We can go one day without eating.
I like fish better, so it was never.
Well, there you go. Jesus met with his disciples in an upper room in the city of Jerusalem. All right, let's look at John 13, 1 to 11. I will also say this about our kids. When we go to confirmation camp, we play a game. One of the games that we play is called Bonkers. And Bonkers is a game where the counselors dress up in funny outfits and they carry socks, white socks filled with flour. And the kids run around the camp, and if you get hit by a sock filled with flour by one of the bonkers, you're wounded and you're frozen in the spot where you got hit. And all the time that they're doing this, they're also supposed to be going to different stations to eat a saltine cracker and whistle, or take water out of the lake with a spoon and fill a coffee cup, or, I mean, all, you know, put your head up, this is my favorite.
Yeah, that baseball.
Put your forehead on a baseball bat, spin around 4 times, and then run over there. I mean, it's just, you know, it's a stitch unless you're the one that's running, right? Well, anyway, the old men can volunteer to be medics. And so there are a lot of years where I've been a medic. And if you get bonked, the bonker has a marker and makes a X or a line on your hand, and then the medic, you know, so you have these kids screaming, "Medic, medic!" You know, of course, I'm in a hurry, right, to get to that kid that's screaming, right? So when I get to that kid that's screaming, I might say, "What's the third commandment?" And if they're from Crookston or, you know, Thief River Falls, they're like, I didn't even know there were that many complaints. Or whatever, you know what I mean? But our kids, I don't know if it's, I know what questions to ask, but, I mean, our kids do learn something,
Yeah,
confirmation.
I noticed that.
So, anyway, all right, who will read John 13, 1 to 11?
Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And during supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper, laid aside his garments, and girded himself with a towel. Then he poured water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. He came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? Jesus answered him, What I am doing you do not know now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, You shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, If I do not wash you, you have no part in me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, He who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but he is clean all over. And you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, You are not all clean.
True or false? Thank you. True or false? Jesus washed his disciples' feet because they were dirty.
No.
Well, yes, they were.
Because they were dancing.
Weren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they've
They were.
been walking around all day. True or false? When Jesus washed his disciples' feet, he did what no other god or king would do.
True.
True. That's very important,
Yeah.
right? That we have a king who washes feet. If you've been through the See Through the Scriptures classes, you know that that's central to our understanding of God's kingdom. Our king washes feet, which really started to make a different kind of impression on me when my dad was at the homestead about who washed his feet. It wasn't the top of the food chain. It was the aides. True or false? Jesus washed the feet of 11 disciples, but not the feet of Judas Iscariot. False. So one of the important things, it seems to me, in our understanding of God's grace, is that Jesus washed 12 disciples' feet, and he fed 12 disciples bread and wine, his body and blood. John 13, 12 to 20, if somebody would read those verses for us, please.
When he had washed their feet and taken his garment and resumed his place, he said to them, Do you know what I have done to you? He said, Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do know them, if you do them. I am not speaking of you all. I know whom I have chosen. It is that the scripture may be fulfilled. He who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I tell you this now, before it takes place, that when it does take place, you may believe that I am he. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who receives anyone whom I send receives me, and he who receives me receives him whom I sent.
All right, so Jesus washing feet means what? two things.
Servant's not greater than his master?
All right.
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
No, I'm just chiming in with your servant.
Oh,
Servant not greater
yeah.
than master. And we are called to serve, right? That would be all part of one, okay? And what else does it mean?
He's giving you an example to follow.
That would be this, Jim, I think.
Okay.
If I don't wash you, you have no part in me. Right? You are included. Isn't that why you wash their feet, huh? If I do not, Lord, you're gonna wash my feet, you'll never wash my feet. If I don't wash you, you have no part in me. So there are some who say, in the Gospel of John, we don't read a whole lot about baptism. But we do read about a foot washing. And again, the sense of washing and inclusion. Okay. After washing their feet, Jesus took his place at table for the Passover meal. Passover celebrates how...
The angel passed over the Israelites.
Read the sentence. Celebrates how, remember there's 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that fill in the blank. I said to Tammy Erickson, how do you design a lesson? They like to fill in the blanks.
Passover celebrates how?
How what?
Pharaoh.
How who?
The Jew?
How?
Oh,
How? Think now.
Pharaoh.
No. How?
Moses.
Oh my goodness! That's the Jewish answer when Jesus says something about feeding manna in the wilderness. Moses gave us bread gave our fathers manna in the wilderness to eat. What does Jesus say? It wasn't Moses. Who was it?
Jesus.
No.
God.
God.
Oh, okay.
Passover celebrates how God set the slaves led by Moses free from their slavery in Egypt. On the Passover table there is unleavened. Why unleavened?
They left before the yeast would rise.
All right. Flat bread bakes faster than a big mound of dough, right? For meat there was also...
Was it quail or pheasant?
Oh, gee.
Boy.
Lamb.
Fish.
Oh my gosh!
I don't want to say anything anymore. That's my question.
That's just how I react at Gustavus. Somebody will say something like that, oh my gosh, you're making me feel bad that you don't know this
That's
answer.
a lamb.
There was lamb. Jim, why would there be lamb at a Passover meal? I didn't hear anybody say lamb.
They did say that.
It's the,
So we didn't know what to say after that.
Chicken. There was chicken. Everybody likes chicken. There was lamb. All right. So sorry I didn't hear that. Well, then I shouldn't have made such a fuss. All right. Luke 22:14-23. Let's read that. So there are 4 accounts of the Last Supper. And as we might expect, the accounts in Matthew, Mark, and Luke are all quite similar. So they are called the Synoptic Gospels, right? And John is much different. So John doesn't mention anything about what we received today with bread and wine, the body and blood of Christ, and with and under bread and wine. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke do. Luke 22:14-23. Somebody will read that for us, please, I hope.
And when the hour came, he sat at table, and the apostles with him.
And he said to them, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I shall not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he said, Take this and divide it among yourselves. For I tell you that from now on I shall not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. And he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And likewise the cup after supper, saying, This cup which is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. But behold, the hand of him who betrays me is with me on this table. For the Son of Man goes as it has been determined, but woe to the man by whom he is betrayed. And they began to question one another, which of them it was that would do this.
True or false? Jesus gave the bread and wine that he called his body and blood to all 12 disciples. That's true. Okay. All of the accounts make clear that that Judas Iscariot participated fully in the supper. That Jesus excluded no one means he loved all. Judas was included. Any of those would work. Judas was included. He loved them all. One of the things that we want our kids to know and our adults to know is that God does not just love good people. Right? Or God does not just love godly people. There's a wonderful book called The Hammer of God. Amy was required to read it at seminary, as was I. And there are three novellas kind of about Christian faith. And the lead story is about an old man who's dying, and he has been a very pious man, a very proper man, and on his deathbed he's delirious. And he starts singing a song like a sailor might sing on leave, if you know what I'm saying. And everybody is shocked. And the young pastor, this is why they have us read it at seminary, the young pastor is trying to say, I don't know where this came from, but it's not him. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. And the family is thinking, he's going to hell. You know, he had a secret life. And then there is it's interesting now, there is an older woman who is there or comes, or do they send for her? I don't remember. But she shows up and she says, God's grace is enough for your grandpa. Which is exactly what the young pastor should have said, right? That it's not, oh, don't worry, it's not, it's not that bad, or, it was just a temporary thing, or, it was before you met your mother, or, no, it is God's grace is sufficient for us. And that calms the whole scene. Very innocent. All right. Mark 14:32 to 42. Say, while I'm thinking of that Hammer of God, that's one of the most formative books that I've had. Another has just been made into a movie.
Really?
Silence. It's by a Japanese man by the name of Endo. And once it's out on DVD, I think we will watch it in adult education. It's a very gruesome, it's got to be I've seen the movie, but it's a gruesome story. But it is exactly along these lines. Have you read that, Amy? Silence by Endo? Tremendous. It's got to be, I mean, I don't know about the movie. It's got to be a tremendous story. We'll watch that next year in adult education. But it's exactly the same kind of thing. All right, Mark 14:32 to 42. Somebody read that for us?
And they went to a place which was called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. And he took with him Peter and James and John, and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch. And going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible to thee. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what thou wilt. And he came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. And he came the third time and said to them, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It is enough, the hour has come, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand.
Thank you. From that upper room, Jesus went with how many disciples? 11. To the Garden of Gethsemane. There he prayed alone, yeah, comma, alone, comma, Father, if it be possible, take this cup. Not my will, but thy will be done. All right, so we want the kids to get that sense, okay? And, I mean, having preached on that in one way or another for the last 15 years, for sure, on Wednesday nights, maybe you grew up in a church, or maybe you've been in a church where the altar painting is of Jesus kneeling at a big rock, right? And praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. Is that what it was in Alma?
I don't recall that. I have that picture you're talking about in my living room.
Okay. And I think that, at least in some of the gospel accounts, we might think of Jesus even flat on the ground. Because it says that he threw himself on the ground. He was begging. Okay? He didn't want to die. Was he afraid to die? That's a different question. But that he was in any way suicidal or had a martyr complex? If it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. When he was finished praying, who came with the temple police to arrest Jesus? Judas Iscariot. Okay? And it's important that we recognize these were not Roman soldiers that came with Judas Iscariot. They were temple police. Because remember, at the temple, here's the sanctuary, and all around the temple, there's a fence. A wall. And on they posted, any Gentile crosses this line will be put to death. And those were Jewish policemen that were enforcing that barrier, right? So that's who the chief priests and the council sent with Judas Iscariot. It wasn't Romans. It was Jewish police, temple police. True or false? God heard and answered Jesus' prayer. True. Tell me, why do you say true?
Well, because he heard it, he answered, and he said, "No, I'm sorry, son."
Okay. True or false? Jesus could have resisted, but he didn't. True.
The human part of him.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was
Yep.
fully human. It wasn't 50-50.
Yep.
Right?
No.
But he could have left.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay? Was he tempted?
He was human, he had to be.
Well, he was.
Yeah.
Right? Really? If you are the Son of God, turn these stones to bread.
Yes.
Right? If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here. The angels. And he will raise you up. You know who the first one is to sing that in the New Testament? The devil.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he will raise you up. Ooh.
Really?
That's why I don't like to sing it. I mean, a lot of people do, but I don't. When I sing that at my funeral, we're going to sing other stuff. The hymn was written, by the way, by the priest at presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary Parish some years ago.
I know he come to give communion to Pat
Yes.
at the house, and so that's how I met him personally.
Yep.
That was one of the songs at his funeral.
Yep. So, I mean, I don't have a problem if somebody else wants to sing it, but I'm just saying.
I think that guy was down at St. Paul Park.
What, Mark?
I think he was from St. Paul Park.
Could be. He's a local guy.
Yeah.
Jerry?
When you say, could he have resisted or been tempted,
Mm-hmm.
are we saying he was tempted from leaving? Or we know he was tempted by the soldiers and everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
but we aren't saying that he was tempted to leave, are we?
Well, I wouldn't hesitate to say that. Did he yield to that temptation?
No.
No. That's why when I was going to say, was he subject to temptation, I didn't say that. Was he tempted? Yes. Was he subject to temptation? No. Because the reason why I bit my tongue was to be subject would imply that he had yielded.
Right. Okay, thanks. Yep.
Was he tempted? I mean, Hebrews says he was tempted in every respect as we are, yet without sin.
Right.
And the same with God hearing and answering his prayer. Answer can mean different things. to different
Right, that's what Sylvia
Uh-huh.
was saying. Judas Iscariot and the temple police took Jesus to the Jewish high council. Now, since you're adults, I'll tell you, and maybe you're familiar with this term, they are called the Sanhedrin. And they are a group of, I think, 70 clergy and lay leaders. Some Pharisees, some Sadducees. Okay? Jewish High Council who had a trial and found Jesus guilty of crimes against God and the temple. These crimes they called
Blasphemy?
blasphemy. Because the Jews could not execute Jesus, they sent him to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. How do you spell Pilate? Pilate.
Does that happen much, where the Jews would send someone to the Roman, I mean, what's the, I don't know that history.
Well, I mean, that's what the Gospels say. I don't know about that, but I must say that I have wondered, because it says the Jews couldn't execute him, so they sent him to Pilate. But the Jews did execute people. If you were stoned, that was an execution.
Right.
And they stoned adulterers, and I think that blasphemers are also supposed to be stoned to death.
Stephen Moyer was stoned to death.
Right.
Now, one of the important verses in the Bible, I think it might be Deuteronomy 22, but don't hold me to that. I know it's Deuteronomy. In the law, it says, "Cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree." And there are some who think that that's why the Jews wanted Jesus crucified. Because in Deuteronomy it says, "Cursed is everyone who hangs on the tree." Okay. But that's a death that shows curse. I mean, cursed by God, you know. I mean, if you curse someone in the Old Testament, you never know what goes on in the sacristy before church, right, Amy? So today, Perry's got braces on for the first time we've seen her with braces on. And Amy's talking with her as a concerned adult, how, you know, does it hurt, how long do you have to have them on, or whatever. And the boys in the back, Goodnick and Preuss, were making fun, not of her exactly, but nobody in his family had braces, neither me and my brothers, I mean, Katie had braces, but, I mean, they have braces in the border, boys. My dad was, I don't care, they're not having braces, you know, we're not spending our money on that. And then I said, if we'd have needed them, he'd have just said, get on the damn stool and sit still, I'll straighten them with a pipe, right? And then I said to Perry, don't tell your folks that the pastor said, damn, because I was just quoting my father. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like I was really, you know, well, in the Old Testament, where it speaks about a curse, that's not saying, you know, pass the damn butter. But a curse is, God damn you, right? That's a curse. It's not just, I ran out of adjectives, so I'm throwing in a four-letter word, all right? That's difference on the part of the speaker. But a curse, so cursed, that means by God is everyone who hangs on a tree. Okay. So that might be, Amy, that's a long answer to your question. After I said I don't know, then I got 10 minutes worth of material. But I mean, all right. Mark 15, 1 to 5. Somebody read that for us, please.
And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests, with the elders and the scribes, and the whole council held a consultation. And they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate again asked him, "Have you no answer to make to thee? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate wondered.
All right. Sherry, why don't you go ahead? I broke it up just so that more kids get to read. Why don't you read through 15?
Okay.
Because this is very interesting to me.
Now at the feast, he used to release for them one of the prisoners for whom they asked. And among them, the rebels in prison, who had committed murder, in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he was wont for them. And he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews?" For he had perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. And Pilate again said to them, "Then what shall I do with the man whom you call the King of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him." And Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified.
All right. True or false? Pilate really didn't want to punish Jesus, but he didn't want to make the people from the temple angry.
True.
True.
Yeah.
True or false? Pilate really had no choice.
False.
That's false.
Yeah.
Everybody in this story has a choice. That's very important, right? Judas Iscariot, he's going to do what he's going to do, but he has a choice, Jesus says. Peter has a choice. Jesus has a choice. Pilate has a choice. Well, let's see if we can do some of the rest of this without reading. True or false, when the soldiers mocked Jesus and called him King of the Jews, they were actually right.
Yeah. Right.
They were.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Unless you want to make the argument that he wasn't king just of the Jews. Right? So, if you see a painting, especially an old painting of the crucifixion, you'll see the sign over Jesus' head, right? With those 4 initials, which stand for Jesus, Jesu, okay, of Nazareth, Rex, King of the Jews, which is the sentence that Pilate ordered. And then the Jews, in one of the gospel accounts, at least one, say, he's not our king. Pilate says, what I've written, I've written. Right? I mean, I could never understand who's Inri.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. All right, Jesus was crucified at 9 a.m. on Friday morning. To be crucified means to be...
Killed on the cross.
Jim, you got to fill in the blanks.
Oh.
I'm not sometimes I'm interested in your own words. Now I want the blanks filled in.
I lost my place.
Hands and feet, tied hands and feet.
Tied or nailed, okay? Apparently, in many cases, crucifixion was by tying. We know Jesus was nailed, hands and feet, to a cross. The Romans used this form of execution because it was...
cheap.
Nope.
Described by what?
Long and tortured.
Because it was torture or excruciating, I mean, whatever. Some people were not nailed or tied to crosses. Some were impaled on crosses. This is what happens to you if you cross the power of Rome. Right? This wasn't just meant to execute, it was meant to deter. Right?
They just let you die too, didn't they?
What?
They just let you die too, didn't they?
We'll talk about that, talk about one aspect of that in just a minute, Mark. 2 other criminals or prisoners were crucified at the same time. Everyone mocked Jesus, and said,
If you are the King of the Jews, come down.
if you are the Son of God, come down from the cross, which is one more temptation, right? So, Marv, back to your question, there's a book about crucifixion where a doctor describes what would happen to someone nailed to a cross. And Jesus had been flogged, so his back was shredded. Right? Now he's naked on the cross, and at his feet there was a step, a shelf that his feet rested on. And in order to, the weight of his body would cause him to sag. And in order to expel the carbon dioxide, this doctor writes, he would have to push himself up so that his lungs could function. Now, aside from everything else, what does that do to your back, which is already raw meat, right? And then, after holding himself up, he would take in air and collapse again. And that was the only way that a prisoner who was being crucified could breathe. And so, in some accounts, there are people lasting for days. The Jews were anxious for this to be over because Passover was starting, right? And they didn't want to have any bodies on crosses for the beginning of that feast. So, at least one of the Gospels talks about one of the soldiers taking a splitting maul and breaking the leg bones of the prisoner on the right and the prisoner on the left. Why? Because then they can't push up, and they'll suffocate all the sooner. And when they came to Jesus, they did not break his legs. Why?
He was already dead.
He was already dead. And it says about the Passover lamb, none of his bones shall be broken. Interesting. So, is Jesus the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world? John the Baptist points to him in John 1. Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. We're used to that language. But on the other hand, and that's a sin offering, right? Makes himself an offering for sin. On the other hand, in the Passion accounts, there is this Passover imagery, and the Passover lamb is not a sin offering. It's so the angel of death passes over, right? And so that God's people think about life and freedom. Is Jesus that lamb, that Passover lamb? Well, his bones were not broken. Because he was already dead, yes, but is it because we're to think he's the Passover lamb? Died at Passover. Right? I mean, there is so much mystery in this, for all we know. Think about what we don't know. At noon on Friday, there was darkness. I was telling somebody, my last year at seminary, I was on the grounds crew. And I was going to Grandpa and Grandma's on Saturday before Easter. So I'm on campus Friday, and the campus is shut down, right? And I'm thinking, well, I'm going to make some money. And so it was an early Easter, and so I go in the tool shed, and I get out an ice chipper, and I'm going to chip ice on the sidewalk for $5 an hour, because that's better than doing nothing. And I was out there for about 45 minutes, and all of a sudden it got dark, like at noon. And I'm thinking, I am going inside. I mean, it was eerie. On Good Friday, it got dark. And I'm thinking, I shouldn't be out here. You know? I should be eating fish, right? Inside reading the Bible or something, but I should not be making $5 an hour a day. I mean, it was something.
Gotta keep it holy.
All right, there was darkness, sort of like an eclipse of the sun. It doesn't say eclipse, but the sky darkened. Then Jesus cried out to God, "Why have you forsaken me?" Or abandoned me. Okay? True or false? God heard Jesus' prayer.
He heard him, yes.
Yes. True or false? God chose not to save Jesus.
He was already dead.
But,
Not when he cried out.
no.
You can look at that two different ways.
How can you look at that two different ways, Diane?
Okay, God chose not to save Jesus because Jesus was put on the earth for our sins, and he was going to die to our sins. But being a father to him, he wanted to save him, but how could he save him if he put Jesus down here to die for our sins? So you can kind of look at that two ways.
That's the sermon on Wednesday night. I'm serious. It's on this text, and that's exactly the issue. So, what we want is for the kids to think, he died on the cross. Did his father save him? Not then.
No.
Right.
Right.
But he also raised him from the dead. So, did he save him? Well, we want them to think, I'm not sure how to answer that, right? We want them to, for just those reasons, okay? And some of this is because in some churches, there is always a right answer to every question. And in other churches, like hopefully this one, there are more questions than answers, right? There are a lot of things we know. Death is the enemy, and God has the last word. We know those things, right? But there are a lot of things we don't know.
Well, we don't even know death is the enemy.
Didn't you listen to the sermon?
Yeah.
Well, how can there be any doubt?
Still doubt it.
All right. I wouldn't sit quite so close to her then. All right. True or false? Jesus could have saved himself if he would have apologized for forgiving sinners and helping outcasts. Yes! Why was he crucified? For forgiving sinners and welcoming outcasts. If he had said to the Pharisees and Caiaphas, the high priest, I take it all back. You know what? I've seen the error of my ways. Thank you, fellas. They'd have said,
Take him down.
give us the right hand of fellowship. We'll nurse you back to health. Jesus' death, true or false, proves he kept his promises and believed what he was doing was God's will. That's true. Which, Diane, goes back to what you were just saying, right? Okay? When Jesus died around 3 p.m., the curtain of the temple was torn in two. That proved what Jesus said about the temple and God's love was true. The first person to recognize Jesus for who he truly was a Roman soldier who, when he saw Jesus die, said, truly this man was the Son of God. Okay? And then we ask kids to write, what does the death of Jesus mean to you? Okay? So, if you want to go to Gustavus with us and get the other 19 lessons, just let me know. And taste that cafeteria food. Thanks very much for today. So, I'll tell you, I'm going to have a conversation with Pat Hagan and Diana Swanson to see. Pat Hagan is supposed to do his calling next week, but maybe we'll do some juggling, and maybe Diana will go next week and Pat wait till next year, or maybe Diana will go next week and Pat will wait till after Easter, or maybe Pat will go next week as scheduled. and Diana will go after Easter. We'll just, all friends, and we want to make it work for everybody. Okay?